Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar organized by ECIA, the European Confederation of Institutes of Internal Auditors. The subject for today is the role of internal audit in ESG in the banking sector. So welcome to all of you, our last webinar before the summer break. I will first start with some logistic details and invite you to log in with Slido that we will use for the question and answer at the end of the session, but also to get your input through the webinar and see if you share our view or not. So please connect. You can just take the picture of the QR code or go to Slido and use the password that you can see on the screen. Last but not the least, in terms of logistic, if you need a CPE certificate, don't worry. You will be able to ask for it also on Slido at the end of the webinar. So ESG is the buzzword here in Brussels for a while now, because ESG factors have really become global imperative. And banks, but also commercial companies are more and more under scrutiny for their sustainability and their ESG factor. We have seen the regulation that has evolved a lot from the non-financial reporting directive to now European Sustainability Reporting Standard, Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, and so on. And what we see is that in all this regulation, there is really a wish for more transparency, more disclosure, but also standardization and harmonization. We also see that these new regulations are really coming out very quickly, much faster than we used to, and are sometimes in contradiction. A very good example is the last draft of the European Sustainability Reporting Standards that based all the requirements mainly on the concept of double materiality, which is a concept that is not existing in the previous regulation like the SFRD. So you see lots going on, lot of constraints, lot of regulation. But ESG is also an opportunity for new products as a bank, new clients still as a bank, and maybe also new talents, or at least retaining talents. What is the role of internal audit in all of that? I think that whatever the position you have in the ESG journey, being starting or being very mature in sustainability matters, internal auditors have a lot of insight to share with the oversight body, with the operational people, and they can give advice, they can give assurance, they can do a lot of things. So I think there must be part of this ESG new transformation and new business style. So today, we are very pleased to have with us the writers of a very interesting paper that is called The Role of Internal Audit in the ESG in the Banking Sector, that you can find on our website, as you can see on the screen. And the writers are coming from two different banks that are really advanced in terms of ESG. The first one being ING, and I'm very pleased to introduce to you today Sarah Gonzalez. She's in a very hot location for the moment, as she's based in Madrid. So thank you for being with us, Sarah. Sarah is currently Senior Audit Manager for ESG Risk. She holds a lot of certificates in ESG, and she's really specialized in this subject. We also have with us Elena Durante, who is based in the Netherlands, so goedemiddag. She's currently audit manager also for ESG risk, and she's a lecturer at the University of Amsterdam. So welcome, Elena. And last but not the least, we have with us today Jessica de Boer, who is ESG audit manager and used to be, before joining ESG, a sustainability consultant. So 3 specialists on one side and 2 others from Germany, from Commerzbank. So welcome to Janina Browning, who is head group audit for Commerzbank and used to be before project manager for group audit. Welcome, Janina. And last one, Patricia Biermann, who is lead auditor sustainability, also specialized in ESG. Welcome, Patricia, and welcome to all of you. And as you can notice, a panel with ladies today. So very good, welcome. Before we start our discussion, we would like to hear from you, participants, what you think is the key challenge in terms of ESG in your organization. So please just put one word, it will appear on the screen and it will help us for the discussion. Data, yeah, that's a good one. We will wait a few minutes. Oh, I see a big one. Okay, I think we can let people jump in and getting used to Slido for those using for the first time. And while we see the results, I will first ask you, Jessica, give you the floor and see what you think. So we see for the moment regulation and data and reporting as being the 3 key challenges for the participants. What's your opinion? What's your experience?
Thank you. Yeah, no, indeed, those are some very recognizable key issues for us as well. So, like you said, I worked before as a sustainability consultant in ING already for 11 years on the topic. And actually, back then, the profession looked very different. There was really a focus on philanthropy and doing good. But the world today looks very different, and it's indeed in part the result of increasing regulatory demands, but also very high expectations of our stakeholders, like our customers, but also NGOs, make sure that they make their voices heard. They tell us what they expect of us in terms of, contributing to a sustainable society. So those regulators and our stakeholders combined setting the bar very high, that is a big challenge for us. And also following that, at ING, we integrated sustainability at the heart of our strategy. And we have this ambition to be the banking leader in sustainability. But what does that mean? It is a challenge to actually get there. Do we have the right data to assess what is the impact of our business? What is the impact of our clients? Do we have the right data to come up with strong sustainability targets? So the data point that is on there, that is very big. That is indeed very true and a big challenge for us, not just in terms of availability, but also accuracy. And once it's there, because many consultancies, of course, have dived upon this topic, and data is starting to come in. But then there's the additional challenge of integrating it into your systems and into your normal decision making and risk management processes. And I'm not sure if it's also on there, but yeah, I see resources and knowledge there as well. Given the fact that that all these developments are going so fast and the topic is becoming so big, it is also a key focus area or attention area to make sure that our people are all trained and that we get the right knowledge in the organization.
Thank you very much. What about your experience at Commerzbank? Patricia, may I ask you, please?
Yes, in Commerzbank, I think one big topic, and it's also on the screen, it's like awareness, regulation, and data, is regulation is a relatively new topic for everyone. It's internally for regulators, etc. And there are certainly uncertainties when it comes to the implementation of the regulation. So there's few expertise you can hire. You might start from scratch when you implement the regulatory requirement, and you have to build your own expertise in addition to the daily work. But we'll talk about this later on. At the same time, the regulators set a really tight time frame. Like I remember when the ECB guide on climate and environmental risks came out, I think the consultation started in May and it was like the final paper was published in November. So it's like a really, really tight time frame we have to consider. And even though the topic is regulatory topic is relatively new, I think the bank has been working on it for quite a few years. As Jessica said, she's been a consultant for 12 years, advising for such a long time. So there might have been some departments in the bank that have been working on these topics for a longer time. And now all this regulation is coming in and you have to aggregate, you have to comply with the regulation. So this is like a really big part, especially in terms of internal governance. Like you need to consolidate everything and identify and use synergies, especially with regards to data, for example. So I think a big challenge is also to understand and define what sustainability is with regards to all these departments that have already been working on the topic and now the new regulation. So you have to have a definition in terms of internal definition and also to explain your stakeholders what you mean with sustainability. This is also really important to prevent greenwashing accusations, and internal audit as its role audits also the internal control system, which is necessary to prevent the greenwashing accusations. To sum up, I think a common understanding internally and externally is the first building block to set up an internal governance, identify synergies, and also establish an effective control system.
Thank you. So you were mentioning the regulation that's evolving, and I was also mentioning this point. Maybe it's good that we have a small overview of the current regulation. So may I ask you, Elena, please, to summarize the situation of today? Thank you.
Yeah, it's very difficult to summarize it in a few minutes and in one slide, in all fairness, because I think what we have witnessed in the last few years is really a steep increase in the regulatory focus, as we were saying, on ESG. But what I think is the reality is that much of these regulatory instruments are very much focused on the E element of ESG, right? And specifically, the regulatory focus has been on the sub-element of climate change within the E, within environmental. And as Patricia was mentioning, one groundbreaking publication from the European Central Bank on this topic has been back in 2020, the ECB Guide on Climate and Environmental Risks. I think this was revolutionary, I think, when it came out, because compared to other geographies, I think Europe is very much ahead on this topic, and the ECB has been very vocal on ESG topics. And so here you see the ECB setting clear expectations towards financial institutions on how they should tackle the matter of climate change, not only within their business model and strategy and governance, but also when it comes to their risk management or risk appetite statements. And last but not least, on their disclosure side, what are they reporting on their efforts on climate change? And on this, I would like also to mention the fact that the ECB also highlights in their expectations the role of internal audit. How should internal audit also contribute, right, to help financial institutions in meeting such expectations? One of those expectations, in fact, 5.6, requires internal audit functions to consider in their reviews the extent to which the institution is equipped to manage climate and environmental risks. That for us at ING was really a wake-up call, you know, like, are we doing enough in our internal audit department to really meet such expectations? But I think we will elaborate on that further, and that's also part of what we shared in this publication of SEIA, so our journey there. But to continue on the regulatory, let's say, environment, to use this word once again, so So indeed, the focus is on environmental from the regulatory perspective, not only from the supervisory authorities like ECB, but also from the European legislator. So you see EU taxonomy is one example, sustainable finance disclosure regulation is another. And last but not least, also the CSRD, so the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which is said to be another revolutionary regulation in the field of ESG, expecting institutions, not only financial institutions, but all organizations that meet certain criteria, to be more transparent in the way that they disclose their social and environmental impact. That's why you see it also mentioned here in the pillar in the middle about social, because I think that will contribute a lot on what is expected from organization, from their, disclosing their social impact. On social in general, I think apart from CSRD, you have seen a bit less of regulatory expectations here. And I think this field has been so far mostly driven by adherence to voluntary frameworks or internationally, let's say, standards. So, for example, the one set by the United Nations guiding principles on business and human rights. And lastly, on governance, I think this is probably the most developed of the three pillars of ESG from a regulatory standpoint. I mean, we have already had for quite some time numerous regulatory expectations when it comes to what is considered good governance, what is expected from a financial institution in terms of their committees, their board composition. But I think with the lens now of sustainability, new topics are added under this pillar. And of course, this is also addressed by CSRD regulation, but you can see also the relevance of diversity, equity, and inclusion being tackled here. Tax evasion, corruption, and anti-bribery. These are all things that already are included in existing regulation and could be considered under the broader umbrella of governance.
Thank you very much. I think now we have set the scene about what is ESG about in a bank, what are the main challenges, and it's time to see what we can do as internal auditor. So maybe we first ask to the participants, what is the role that they play today in their banks in terms of ESG, so that we can get your feedback afterwards. So please let us know. It seems that assurance is the number one. So may I ask Janina, maybe what's your experience at Commerzbank? What do you do in your bank?
I personally agree with the priority one on assurance. So in my opinion, the main role of internal audit in general is to give assurance by making the company then safer with independent audits and assessment of the controls and the processes. And this, of course, also applies to ESG related topics, checking those for appropriateness with the external requirements and if the processes are working effectively. So that's also our main focus at Commerzbank, internal audit, giving assurance on how the bank is applying those regulations and how appropriate our processes are with regard to the ESG part. And we do this, for example, by conducting like regular audits and also by getting involved in the material projects we have at Commerzbank, focusing on implementing the ESG requirements. However, we of course also receive questions or have our other departments seeking our consult in terms of implementing new requirements and amending the processes. So audit also has an advisory role, especially in terms of new regulations. And as we gain like a really broad insight throughout the whole company, we can also give some advice in how to process those.
Thank you. Sarah, do you think that the role evolve also with the maturity of ESG within the bank and within the organization or not? What are your thoughts?
Yes, indeed. In fact, I think that the decision about our role is really based on the maturity level of the implementation of the specific ESG elements in the organization. In the case of ING, for example, we do both assurance and non-assurance audit work. So for the topics that are more mature and there is a control framework in place, we do standard audits where we provide an opinion. This is the case, for example, for audits we do on sustainable products. In ING, we have been offering sustainable products to our corporate clients since years. So the control environment is mature enough to provide assurance. However, there are other topics that are less mature or that are in development right now, like, for example, the implementation of the climate risk management practices that both Elena and Patricia already mentioned. And for those aspects, we do audit engagements where we don't provide assurance, we don't give an audit opinion, but we provide our conclusions and we report the issues that we identify and we ask management to refine action plans for the areas that require improvement. So I think it is key to understand the maturity level of the different ESG initiatives in the company to assess how we can add more value to the organization and to adapt our role and audit activities to that. But also, I would like to highlight the role of internal audit beyond audits, because I think that our business partners, I'm not going to call them auditors, they consider us trusted advisors, and because we have high expertise in risk and controls. So they value our input and our view on the different developments, and we can help them identifying potential gaps that they can address in an earlier stage. In that sense, for example, in ING, our ESG audit team attends to specific ESG committees that exist in the bank, and we have regular contact with the ESG stakeholders in order to provide them our view on the latest developments. For example, for CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which I would say is one of the biggest challenges that companies are facing now in terms of ESG reporting, our audit team participates in the specific steering committee that was created in ING to manage this program globally. And with our presence there, we can provide our feedback and expertise to management, and it can add value to them.
Thank you very much. I think one question that we can raise as well is how to couple with these new duties as an internal audit department, knowing that you have already a lot of questions from the ECB on other risks, and these risks are still there. So how do you manage that? Do we need a special department? What is the situation? So maybe we can ask also the participants what is their experience before knowing your thoughts about this. So do you participants have a dedicated team, in your department of internal audit to manage these new audit types, I would say? Interesting. 83% say no. Sarah, would you agree with that? Is it what you did at ING?
Well, I'm not very surprised, to be honest, because last week I also attended to a specific conference for internal audit, international conference, and I also had a presentation where I asked the same question to the audience. It is true that the audience was not just banks, there were participants from internal audit teams from other sectors, but it's true that the results are quite aligned because I'm checking out the screenshot that I have from my poll, and it was only 23% say yes and 77% say no. So more or less, it is quite aligned. Well, it is true that I understand and the reasons behind, But this is not the case for ING, for example. In our case, in ING, we decided to create a specific dedicated audit team with central ownership for ESG in 2021. Okay, we are a small team, just the three of us that are today in this webinar. But for us, it was very relevant to ensure that we have dedicated resources for ESG within audit, and for different reasons. But we need those resources to be on top of the evolving regulatory landscape, to develop a structured audit approach for ESG across the organization, and to do dedicated audits on this topic. In our case, the dedicated team has the expertise on ESG. So we provide also support to other audit teams when they do audits on ESG. Well, also, it is true that ING is a bank that is operating in multiple countries, in many geographies. So also we are aware that there are potential local developments, initiatives, and local regulations in other geographies that we need to consider for our audit coverage. No? So for that purpose, also we decided last year in 2022 to create a network of ESG champions in internal audit. And what is that? Well, this is a virtual network of internal auditors from different audit teams that are located in different countries that are interested in the topic. So they are like our sustainability ambassadors, I would like to call them. So we use this virtual network for many purposes, but mainly to share knowledge, audit practices, but also to be updated on those ESG local initiatives and to assess the completeness of our audit coverage of ESG across ING. I think the fact that we have a dedicated team on ESG also facilitated us to provide this overview to the audit committee and the senior management about how ESG is working in ING. No? What is the status of the different elements and what are the key messages? For example, in terms of reporting to the audit committee, it is true that all audit reports go to the audit committee, including the specific ESG dedicated reports that we issue. But we prepare in internal audit a quarterly report that goes for MBB members and to the audit committee. This quarterly report includes a summary of the relevant issues coming from the different audit activities we do. And since January last year, we included a specific section for ESG in that report. And with this specific section, we can highlight the key messages for this topic to senior management. And this helps us to avoid that relevant messages for ESG are diluted. That could be the case if we just mention those elements as part of the existing sections of the report, like credit risk or market risk. So, well, apart from that, in terms of governance, also an organization, as I mentioned before, in general, in the company as a whole, there are many ESG committees that were set up in the last 2-3 years. And in our case, the ESG audit team is attending as an observer to these committees at global level. So also in terms of business relationship and developing a stakeholder relationship, the fact that we have a dedicated team in sustainability on ESG facilitated that. But this is the view of ING, of course.
Very interesting, thank you, and original as well, and also described in the paper for those that want more information. So what's the experience of Commerzbank, Patricia? What do you do?
Actually, it's quite similar. We also have a dedicated team in which Janina and I are. But we do not focus solely on ESG. We cover also different aspects like strategy, sustainability, and capital management is our team. So we cover many overarching topics. And ESG is also horizontal. So it's in each process of the bank and it needs to be covered everywhere. And so there is also like different audits. We have audits that focus solely on ESG, and we have then audits that only cover like a little part of ESG. And there is different departments that are responsible for these audits. And in order to cover the right aspects, we also discuss our audit plan regularly, and we have a quarterly process in Commerzbank to assess the risks, and ESG is also a main risk for us. So it's always discussed quarterly, and we can adapt the audit plan as well. And then internally, to get like a broad audit coverage, we set up a sustainability working group, which is hosted by our department. And there's members of each department in the audit function. And we talk about the audits that cover ESG aspects in order to cover all the regulatory requirements and everything. And with regards to committees in the bank in general, Commerzbank also set up a group sustainability board, which is hosted by the CEO, since sustainability is also one of our 4 pillars of the strategy. And Audit also participates as a guest in order to give like the assurance and always know about the latest stuff in ESG and the bank and the strategy. So this is what we do in Commerzbank.
Thank you very much. Maybe a small question to both of you. What's the relation between the sustainability committee and the risk committee? Is there any connection in your bank, ING or Commerzbank, on this ESG point actually?
You mean, Pascal, within the organization? In the case of ING, we have a lot of committees related to sustainability, but it's true that we ensure that, well, they have ensured that all representatives from the first and second line are on those committees. So if there is a committee more related to risk, ESG risk, for example, there is people from the first line, from sustainability team. So yeah, so it depends on the topic, but there is connection between both first and second line in all the committees.
Yeah, I guess it's a challenge for the future because, as you mentioned, I mean, many committees are on ESG, remuneration is also on ESG, and so the coordination between all these committees will be, I think, a challenge also that will increase in the future, but we will see, maybe for another webinar. So I would like to ask a final opinion of the participants. And by the way, in between, we have 245 people joining the webinar. So that's quite nice for a July webinar. And we would like to know, what is your experience in terms of topics that are including in your audit universe? So what do you include? Please let us know so that we can react. It seems stable, so maybe we can start commenting with your own experience. So Jessica, what's your experience at ING compared to what you can see here on the screen?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I also see that about 100 people have reacted, and we didn't give the option. We don't include any ESG topics, so I'm curious if the 150 people that haven't reacted are not on any ESG team. But okay, I mean, I'm very happy to see that the climate and environmental part are, are being taken into account quite often, and to a lesser extent, diversity and human rights. I think that actually broadly also is reflected in our audits. Maybe good to say that aside from the audits that we do as a specific ESG team, indeed, we also work together with all the other audit teams where ESG might be a small part in, for example, a product approval audit or, an audit of mortgages where there is a climate angle where we add in some additional steps or expertise. But for us, our team, ourselves, we focus on 3 key themes. So we've been around for about 2 years. And the audits we have done are either in the ESG risk space, more on the sustainable opportunities or sustainable product side of things, and in reporting. So for the risk side, we've looked at both the impact materiality side of things and the financial risk side of things. So for the first one, we've looked at our ESR management approach to see if the ESR framework that ING has set out, is complete, is proper, covers all the relevant topics and all the relevant parts of the business, etc. For the climate risk, in light of course, all the ECB requirements from the guide, we've looked at How do we define climate risk? What are the relevant climate and environmental risk drivers for ING? How do we assess if they are material? And how do the outcomes of this new exercise feed into our normal risk management procedures? Then on the opportunity side of things, we've looked at different products, so including sustainable lending, sustainable bonds, and investments. As Sarah said, we've had those for quite a few years in ING, so you can do some actual audits there. So we looked at the type of product we offered. When are they labeled sustainable? Is there proper governance and decision making around that? And how is this also marketed and reported, keeping greenwashing risk in mind? And last but not least, we've looked at reporting. So for example, EBA Pillar 3 for banking, of course, new requirements on climate change impacts. So we looked at the accuracy and completeness of the data we disclose and how that connects to our normal disclosures in the annual report. As well as ING's climate report, which is a separate document on climate alignment and climate risks. We checked the process and controls in place and the accuracy of that. So those are a few key examples, but the main topics are risk, opportunity, or product sides, and reporting.
Thank you very much, Jessica. You mentioned a few times greenwashing. Maybe it's also interesting to share with everyone that there was a publication of ECB quite recent, a few months ago, with their definition about greenwashing. So I invite all of you to have a look, because I think it's quite an interesting document. And what's the experience at Commerzbank? May I ask you, Janina, what do you do? What are your topics?
Yeah, so similar to our colleagues from ING, we also have a look on all the different ESG components, so all three of them, and yeah, look on different aspects, considering the maturity level. This includes audit activities to our Commerzbank own contribution to ESG, as well on what we are doing to support our clients to achieve their sustainability transformation. So I would say the main focus of our audit activities is on like climate and environmental risk and diversity, but we also have audits on focusing on social aspects. Like, for example, currently we have a look on in Germany it's called Lieferketten-Sorgfaltspflichtengesetz, so Supply Chain Due Diligence Act, which was recently implemented. And of course, we also have audit activities on the governance part, which are more mature, and already had several audit activities on those. Other example for auditors which we conducted, for example, last year we had an audit on the material project, focusing on the governance and the setup of ESG within the bank. What do we have in terms of written guidelines, strategy? How do we define our strategic KPIs? How are the different roles defined within the bank? Which role does risk management play? And yeah, parts like that. And we also have a look on the each risk type, which is defined as material risk type within the bank, and how it is affected by the new risk type ESG as horizontal risk type. So yeah, that are another examples. Another one we had, for example, was the climate risk stress test, which we had a look on. So really different parts or aspects of ESG components. And another major topic which we focus on our audit activities, you mentioned greenwashing risks and the guideline which was published. So we also have a look on those in terms of our sustainable products which we offer. And yeah, that's also part of our audit plan.
Thank you. I think a question that I heard from many auditors is auditing ESG business as usual, or is it something different? So in terms of work program, what do you apply? So maybe we hear first from Commerzbank, Patricia.
Yes, thank you. It is a little different because ESG is a very wide topic. Elena presented all these regulations, all these regulatory requirements that we need to focus and assess if it's like short or is it not. And Janina also mentioned ESG for Commerzbank is horizontal, meaning it spreads into each risk type of Commerzbank. Is it credit risk, market risk, operational risk, reputational risk? It's in each process of the bank. So currently, we do not have a standard audit program to assess all these regulatory requirements. However, we did take an active role when we worked with the DEER, which is like the German ECIIA, and they developed a standard questions based on the BaFin's publication, and it's currently in the German MA-Risk. So they developed like a standard questions, and we adapted those to our bank's needs. So we do have those. However, from our side, this is not enough because we saw all these different regulations and we have to audit all of these regulations. So it's really important to decide each year on where do you want to take a look at in ESG? What is the maturity level? What do you want to audit? Where is the risk? And what can we do? So it's not necessary risk oriented to ask the same standard questions like in each audit. So you need to individually decide what you want to audit, and currently we're just auditing. Janina presented some details that we audited with regard, and she also mentioned with regards to we focus on climate and also on biodiversity, but we also audit social, like the LKSG. And she mentioned that with regards to governance, for example, that we're more matured. Like we have a standard program that is already more established, and we consider like many topics in each of our audits. So I would say, to sum up, with regards to E and S, we do not have any standard programs and we have to assess individually. And with regards to the G part, we do have standard questions and that we audit in each audit that is not only focused on ESG.
Thank you very much. And I think two other complexity maybe to add to the debate is the fact that not everything has been implemented yet. So it's still work in progress, which is maybe something difficult for internal audit. And last but not the least, ESG is not just a compliance exercise. I think that's really what we try to explain to everyone. It's much more than that, because your culture must also embed ESG, your remuneration. I mean, it's a lot of implication, your business process, your strategy, everything. So what is your experience at ING, Elena, in terms of audit program? Do you have specific ones?
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar to what Patrizia already shared, frankly, because as you just said yourself, also Pascal, ESG is fast evolving, also in our organization. We have seen a lot of changes within our established functions, for example, setup of new teams within risk or compliance or even first line. So we have to, from an internal audit perspective, also to adapt and see what is the organization development path on their ESG setup, and we have to audit what is already mature enough in the organization, and perhaps also look at what is evolving and whether it is evolving fast enough compared to, for example, what regulators are asking. So we generally took the approach of developing ad hoc audit work programs so far, because that is, I think, what worked best, considering, as I said, the multiple changes and the current status of ESG risk management processes, for example. But we see and we have a vision to change this for the future. So we are working, for example, on delivering some standard audit guidances to our other teams that work in audit in the various entities where ING is active, so in various geographies. When it comes, for example, to auditing, I don't know, sustainable products. So in that regard, I think something can be done in terms of developing a standard audit program. But for the rest, I think having an ad hoc work program works best. I'd like to mention here also our work done together with other financial institutions back in 2022, when it comes to developing an audit work program specifically tailored to the expectations that ECB set out when it comes to climate risk, but also mirroring partially the PRA expectations on climate risk supervisory statements. It was an excellent example of how peers in the industry can work together to build something that is non-existent and is yet experimental. At least it was 1 year ago. And each one of us from each bank worked on a different work element of the work program. And combined, we were able to deliver this comprehensive audit work program to potentially audit anything in relation to the climate risk expectations of the ECB. So it was a good starting point, I can say. We at ING use it as a basis for some of our audit engagements successfully. But of course, it's a document that needs to be developed over time, as also best practices in the industry mature and they're shared. And also when it comes to more established controls and processes within each of our organization.
Thank you very much. I see the time is running, but before giving the floor for the Q&A, I would like to ask Sarah, maybe, what is, in your opinion, the added value of internal audit in this subject, ESG?
Thanks, Pascal. Well, I think there is a lot of added value indeed. Well, to start, for example, from internal audit, I think we have a privileged position to provide a holistic view to senior management and to the audit committee about how the different ESG topics are managed in the entity. We can ask them to take actions for specific areas that could require more focus or more resources, and they can obtain an independent assessment of the different ESG components in the bank and an overview of the main gaps. And additionally, for the topics that are on the top of the agenda of regulators, we can help management to assess the readiness of the organization to meet the regulatory expectations. This is the case, for example, of climate risk management. No, we all mentioned that there is an expectation from ECB that all banks implement specific risk management practices on climate risk at the end of 2024. As an internal auditors, we can assess the existing roadmaps that were defined in the different banks to meet the supervisory expectations. So we can evaluate the readiness of the bank to meet them timely. And in case we notice that there is not sufficient progress, we can escalate that and raise issues in order that management can take action on time. And another area where I think we can add value is helping the organization to break silos. We are overseeing the full organization, so we can help management to connect with other areas in charge of ESG to find synergies and to align approaches. For example, most of the reporting activities, like the annual report, have been always under the remit of finance areas. However, there are many banks where there are other specific ESG or sustainability reports that are produced by other areas, like sustainability teams. And those areas usually have less expertise in reporting controls and reporting protocols. So we, as an internal auditors, we are able to compare both approaches and control frameworks, the one from finance, the one from sustainability team or other teams, because we have this global overview. So we can help management to identify the best practices from other control frameworks existing in the bank and connect dots. Another example that could be also for the definition of the governance of ESG. We have this global overview of all business areas and we know who does what in terms of ESG. So we can also help management to identify potential missing areas in some ESG committees or other governing bodies. This is something that I mentioned before. So in conclusion, I think that we are very well positioned to support the bank, the organization, in their pathway for a more sustainable business. And we can add value to the business partners with our global overview of the organization and the expertise we have on risk and controls.
Thank you very much. Sounds like a conclusion, but before we have some Q&A. So please don't hesitate to ask your questions via Slido. And we will see already what are the questions that we have so far. Maybe it will take a little bit of time to come on screen. So I will read one that I see. And it is about how difficult was it for you to recruit people with ESG expertise in your internal audit team? Who wants to answer this one?
Yeah, maybe I can take this one.
Thank you.
We took the approach actually of growing talents from within. So Sarah and myself, for example, were already in the internal audit department of ING working on different areas of the bank, and with time we just developed this passion and interest on ESG, and we thought to do something with it within our function. So we started to also try to get academic knowledge on it. So that's why I think we made an effort to study because there is a lot actually to study on ESG. And I encourage everyone, who has an interest and currently works in internal audit to start this journey. There is a lot out there, a lot of information and materials. So that was very, very easy for us. So then to be part of this team that we decided to create. But at the same time, we also knew that we wanted to work further and have a stronger also ESG skills in our team. That's why we luckily we had Jessica joining us. She was within ING and very skilled with her past experience on ESG topics, not from an internal audit perspective, but from a different first-hand risk and second-line perspective. So that was a great addition to the team. Because I think what is key to understand here is that to build an ESG audit team, you need different skill set. And sometimes you need to create those within your organization, which I think is the most successful choice. There are a lot of people with passion for sustainability, and that passion can translate into great results, also internal audit space, if you give people enough support and time to grow and nurture those, those passions and those skills.
Very interesting. Anyone wants to add something? No. Okay. Then maybe we can go to the next most popular question, which is, how do you envisage the future of internal audit role in ESG? Who wants to answer this one?
I can
Sarah?
take this one, Pascal. Yes. Well, in fact, the vision that we have in our bank, in our internal audit team for ESG, is that we want really to integrate ESG in all the audits, because at the end, we know that ESG is a very transversal risk. No, there are many business areas involved. It impacts everywhere, all the geographies. So once it is well integrated in the organization and it becomes as part of the business as usual, this is the ultimate goal for internal audit also, to integrate the different ESG controls in all the existing audits. So what we notice is, okay, we started doing more dedicated audits on specific topics, because we are aware that also the maturity of the ESG developments is still in development, is early maturity. So we understand that the business is not yet prepared to integrate ESG in all the different business areas, in all the audits. Imagine procurement, HR, finance, everywhere. But this is the ultimate goal, no? That ESG becomes like another element that should be tested in all or most of the audit that we have in the audit universe. And in order to achieve that, as Elena said, it is key, no, that first you have created sufficient awareness in the internal audit team, no, that all the people can identify those ESG risks and can embed them in their existing audits. So, well, this is how we foresee the future of ESG in internal audit in our case.
What is the view of the Commerzbank? Patricia, Janina, what do you think?
Yeah, sure. Maybe to add to your explanation, because I agree with what you just said, Sarah. I think what also the regulator maybe is expecting for us to have like really dedicated audits on the ESG topic and to find it as a really fixed part in the audit plans and continuously over the next year. So maybe from my opinion, you have in the previous years, it was also fine to have as part of one of the audits, there's a smaller ESG part. But I think going forward, it needs to really have dedicated audits on those topics, which really focus and have also a deeper review of the respective processes and controls. So I think they will also strengthen their view on our audit department there.
Yeah, thank you. And if I may, I would like just to add a small other dimension, which is the dimension of the audit committee of the governing body. Because we know that in CSRD, it's a liability, it's an obligation for them to oversee the ESG risk. They are liable for that. And I think they also expect internal audit to help them, assist them in this new duty. So I think this is another dimension also to consider in the evolution of the internal audit function. It's the way we can help the governing body and also the way maybe we can develop a kind of assurance chain where we would have internal audit giving an opinion, giving some views, external auditors giving views, and maybe shortly, not maybe, for sure, I think the ECB, because for sure they will also include that in their own review, in their own SREP analysis and things like that. So I think the future of the role of internal audit will also depend on how these different pieces of the puzzle will evolve and needs to be considered. I think we have maybe a time for a very last question, and I would take the one with the rating agency. What's your experience with the rating agency? How are they aligned or not aligned? Who wants to answer this one? I see you smiling, Jessica. Oh, no.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah. I was thinking this is a whole topic by and of itself, and I think there's also EU legislation in the make to actually standardize the way of working and to sort of ensure the quality of those ESG ratings. Of course, high level, I mean, they are all covering the E, S, and G. But all of their sort of assessments are proprietary, so they are sometimes a bit of a black box, so you don't know all the details of how they come to their end conclusions and their end results. So it's actually quite hard to assess as a user how comparable they are in the end. Yes, so that's another challenge for us.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's time now to thank you. Thanks the participants first. We went up to 258 people, so thank you for your interest and support. Thank you to our speaker for sharing your experience, but also writing your experience. So I invite all those that are interested by these two example of ING and Commerzbank to have a look at the paper, and you will see that there are very practical information in terms of audit programs and how to approach the topic. So I think that's interesting. And before thanking everyone, I will just take some of the bullet points that I have written down during the discussion. So I think what is interesting is the concept of the sustainability ambassador. I like that. I also like the fact that indeed you need to have a very clear definition about ESG sustainability. You need ad hoc programs. You need to play a role beyond the trusted advisor. You need to share your insight. You need to add value to the organization because internal audit is transversal, is supposed to know the organization quite well and help the management for assessing the ESG implementation and embedding in the organization. I also like the future of audit to integrate ESG in all the audit in the future. And on this last point, I really thanks everyone for the contribution and for sharing the experience. And if you need a CPA certificate, Please fill in your details on Slido. There is a special page on Slido where you can give the information to us, and your national institute will come back to you with the certificate. So thank you, everyone. And I hope that like two of us, you are looking for your break summer very shortly, because Elena and myself, we decided to have this background, thinking about the end of the week and our holiday. So have a good holiday, everyone. Thank you very, very much. And good luck with all these new ESG role for internal audit, but also challenges. Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.